We never paid any heed to the ancient prophecies. Like fools, we clung to the old hatreds. And fought as we had for generations. Until the day the sky rained fire, and the new enemy came among us. We stand now upon the brink of destruction, for the reign of chaos has come at last.
Warcraft 3 was for many people their introduction into the story of Warcraft. There is a lot to be said about this game and its influence, both from its story, its style, and the map editor that gave birth to a new genre of games. But on this channel I would like to specifically talk about the game's story. I don't suppose it would be controversial to say that, in my opinion, Warcraft 3 was one of the best stories that Blizzard ever wrote. While the first two Warcraft games told the story of an alien race of monsters that came to ravage and burn a new world, and the valiant men that stood against them in defense of their homes, the conflict was strictly orcs and humans, with Warcraft 2 adding in a few other races like elves, dwarves, trolls, and goblins. Warcraft 3, released in 2002, paved the way to a larger world and a grander story. The Horde and Alliance must work together to combat new threats, with the addition of 2 new playable factions, and the introduction of a new continent. The way is paved for the return of the Burning Legion to Azeroth.
The sands of time have run out, son of Durotan. The cries of war echo upon the winds. The remnants of the past scar the land. Besieged once again by conflict. Heroes arise to challenge fate and lead their brethren to battle. As mortal armies rush blindly towards their doom, the burning shadow comes to consume us all. You must rally the Horde and lead your people to their destinies. Seek me out.
For over 2 decades, the orcs of the Horde and the humans of the Alliance have been locked in a vicious cycle of hatred and war. Stormwind was devastated by Blackhand during the First War, and the kingdoms of Lordaeron, Stromgarde, and Quel'thalas suffered heavy losses from Doomhammer's march north in the Second War. The orcs' homeworld of Draenor was ripped apart, and many noble heroes on both sides of the conflict have fallen. While the orcs languished in camps for years, they have risen up and cast off their shackles, under the leadership of Thrall, ready to carve their own place in this world. Yet the storm looms overhead, ready to set the whole of Azeroth to the flame. The Prophet has issued his warning to Thrall, and as he awakens from his nightmares, Thrall hears the voice of a raven calling to him, "Seek me out." The first mission of the game serves as a tutorial for all of the new features that were added to Warcraft 3. The jump between the first 2 Warcraft games was quite large, with Warcraft 2 adding quality of life changes, naval combat, and a number of new units, and Warcraft 3 continues with this level of innovation. Most notably, heroic units are a new addition to Warcraft, which differentiate themselves from regular units by having a level system, an inventory, scaling stats, and most importantly, 4 abilities that can be unlocked and upgraded. In addition to that, there are now neutral creatures around the map like gnolls, ogres, and golems that can be fought for experience and items. Lastly, a day-night cycle is explained, with most neutral enemies falling asleep at night, and the sight range of all units being reduced. Having rallied a few warriors and fought his way across the river, Thrall meets with the Prophet, who warns the war chief that the only way to save his people is to sail to the Forgotten Lands in the west, for demons are returning to Azeroth. The clans have been mobilized, and the Horde constructs a small base to house them once they arrive. The only one left unaccounted for is the Warsong clan, and it would not take long to figure out that they had run into trouble on their approach. Nearby, a human encampment launches an attack against the orc base, alerting them to a number of orc prisoners held in cages at the town. Not only were the Warsong captured, but their chieftain, Gromosh Hellscream, has also been imprisoned. Not willing to leave anyone behind, Thrall rallies his forces to rescue them. Thankfully, neither Grom or his forces were injured, and with the Horde assembled, they can prepare to leave human lands for good. Stealing a number of ships from the nearby harbor, the Horde sneaks out from under the noses of Lordaeron's forces and begin their long journey to Kalimdor. I always forget these missions were re-added in Frozen Throne. Thrall's ships were forced to take shelter on an island after encountering severe storms, where they come across a strange troll watching them. Sen'jin, leader of the Darkspear tribe, warns Thrall that this island used to be his people's, but that humans have recently made landfall as well. The Darkspear enlist Thrall's help as their combined forces strike out at the Quel'thalan expedition, led by Sanath Tidebringer. Along the way, they help purify a fountain of healing for Sen'jin before tearing down the settlement on the west side of the island. Unfortunately, even as the last of the humans fall, the battle is not over. Fish-like creatures called Murlocs climb out of the sea and attack the Horde, ultimately capturing them and dragging them off to a nearby cave as prisoners. The Murlocs had been peaceful up until recently, when the Sea Witch Zarjira took command of them. The orcs and trolls are being held as sacrifices, but Thrall breaks his way out of his cell and begins to make his way through the cave, rescuing any other prisoners he comes across. As he frees more orcs and trolls, it becomes apparent that Sen'jin is set to be the Murlocs' latest sacrifice to their goddess. And although Thrall does his best to reach the old troll in time, he finds he is too late to stop the Murloc sorcerer from conducting the ritual. The island's volcano is set to burst, and with his dying breath, Sen'jin asks Thrall to lead his people off of the island. Thrall accepts Sen'jin's request, and with little other choice, as the island is soon to be dragged under the waves, the Darkspear swear their allegiance to Thrall's horde. As Thrall emerges into the open air, the situation is dire. The volcano has begun its eruption, Darkspear forces are scattered around the island, their ships are in need of repairs, and Zarjira's Murlocs are on the hunt for them. Repairs to the ships will need to be done quickly, and the remaining trolls will need to be rounded up or be left to die on the island. The ships would need to be defended as the peons worked on repairs, as Murlocs assaulted the Orcs' base to try and destroy the only way off of the island. Even as larger waves of fish monsters launched themselves at Thrall's defenses, the Orcs held them off just long enough for the repairs to be finished, and the remaining Orcs and Trolls to evacuate onto the ships. Zarjira curses them as they flee, calling out that the dark tide will swallow them all. But even as the island sinks into the waves, Thrall turns his eyes west. It is in Kalimdor where the destiny of the Horde will unfold, and where they will stand against the demons of the Burning Legion.
We've received reports that the Orcs are regrouping. Certainly the recent attacks against the internment camps are evidence enough.
Agreed. The Horde is on the move.
This is absurd. My nation will not stand by and watch as the Horde masses on our very doorstep.
The Orcs are not our primary concern here. How many times must I repeat myself?
King Tyrannus, you must heed my warning.
This plague that has gripped the Northlands could have dire ramifications.
Wizards are just being paranoid. Let's keep all this in perspective. Even if this plague does pose a threat to us, what are you proposing that we do?
It is simple. As I have said, the Kirin Tor are already prepared to place the villages under strict quarantine.
I will not institute quarantine without proof of your claims, Ambassador. The people of Lordaeron have suffered enough without becoming prisoners in their own lands.
Yet prisoners they are, good king.
What is the meaning of this? Who are you?
Humanity is in peril. The tides of darkness have come again, and the whole world is poised upon the brink of war.
Enough of this. Guards, remove this madman.
Hear me. The only hope for your people is to travel west, to the forgotten lands of Kalimdor.
Are you mad?
Old Ambassador, I don't know who you are or what you believe, but this is not the time for rambling prophets. Our lands are beset by conflict, but it shall be we who decide how best to protect our people, not you. Now, be gone!
I failed humanity once before, and I will not do so again. If you cannot take up this cup, then I shall find another who will.
The warning has been given. Their fate is now their own.
Lordaeron is beset by problems from all sides. The Horde is active once again, and a plague has been spreading through the Eastweald. The mages of the Kirin Tor advise for quarantine, but the other nations of the Alliance think them to just be paranoid old wizards, and that the plague is simply nothing more than a passing disease. As it would turn out, there is truth to what the Dalaran ambassador speaks, so says the prophet. Arriving at the court of the Alliance, he pleads his case to any who will listen, that the plague is only the beginning of what is to come, and that the only hope of survival lies in the ancient and forgotten lands of Kalimdor to the west. Yet his warning falls on deaf ears as the Alliance Council removes him from their court. The prophet has already failed mankind once before, nearly delivering it straight into the hands of the Burning Legion, and now that he has returned to Azeroth, he intends to ensure its survival. If the wise leaders of the Alliance cannot see what is about to play out before them, then perhaps there are others out in the lands of Lordaeron who will. The orcs have been raiding villages, and so Tyrannus sent his son, Arthas, to meet with the great Uther the Lightbringer to investigate the situation. Greeting each other as old friends, Uther takes his men to deal with a nearby orc encampment, while Arthas rushes to Stormrage to bolster its defenses. Their scouts have reported that a group of orcs is on their way to the nearby town, and that it is completely defenseless. The road is dangerous, however, as Arthas frees young Timmy from a band of gnolls, and deals with a group of bandits that have been stealing from the populace of the countryside. Yet when they arrive at Stormrage, they are already too late. The orcs have begun to raid the town and burn it to the ground. The orcs are rounding up the villagers and bringing them back to their encampment, and while Arthas may have been too late to save those that have already been taken, he confronts the slave master that leads the orcs in the area, taking him down. With Stormrage secured, he rushes to meet with Uther at the orc encampment. Two of Uther's best knights were sent to parley with the orc leader, and as Arthas arrives to meet with Uther, so too do their horses. Though Uther tempers Arthas' desire to avenge the knights, he does offer Arthas the opportunity to lead the attack against the orc camp, while he remains behind to protect their own camp against any incursions. Meanwhile, at the orc camp, the Blade Master of the Blackrock clan has begun to sacrifice their prisoners to their demonic masters. This only further spurns Arthas into action as he rallies his soldiers into the orc's base and battles the Blade Master. With the help of a flaming orb made from the heart of the Black Dragon Cyronox and crafted by the dwarves, the Blade Master stood little chance. Still, it is a bit disturbing to see the orcs attempting to summon demons into Azeroth, but Uther assures him that the orcs are merely holding on to their own dying traditions, and that the warlocks and their demons were defeated long ago in the Second War. After a long day of service, the two paladins head back for home. 2 weeks after Arthas defeated the orcs, the prophet meets with Antonidas and Dalaran. Although the Archmage does not listen to the warning, his nearby apprentice does listen in on their conversation. Once the prophet leaves, Antonidas turns his attention towards her and the two discuss matters of the plague. Antonidas believes that the plague may be magical in nature, and so he needs Jaina to go into the Eastweald and investigate any such reports of the plague. As it could be potentially dangerous, Antonidas arranged for Arthas to escort her through the area. 3 days later, Arthas and his men await Jaina for hours, with the prince reassuring his men that she has a habit of being fashionably late. As she arrives, she proves herself more than capable of handling herself, but welcomes the company of Arthas and his knights. The prince and the sorceress head out along the King's Road to see if any of the nearby villages have been affected by the plague, unaware of what they will encounter. Not long into their journey, Arthas and Jaina are hindered by a collapsed bridge. According to the townsfolk, someone on the other side destroyed it, forcing them to take an alternative route. Upon reaching the other side, they are assaulted by a wave of undead skeletons. The entire village was raised in undeath, and the source quickly becomes apparent when they come across an infected grain silo. The land around the silo is blighted and dying, but the seal on the crates matches that of Anderhall, a major distributor of grain in northern Lordaeron. Continuing with their investigation, they fight their way through the village, where necromancers are seen working their twisted magic and raising the dead. According to some elves, a grain warehouse lies at the other end of the village. When Arthas and Jaina go to inspect the plagued grain, they meet a man dressed in dark robes who quickly escorts his cultists away and lets loose several skeletons and an abomination of several corpses sewn together. Only more questions were raised in their journey, but the answers they seek may lie in Anderhall. The cult has been seen skulking around the area of Anderhall, and so Jaina and Arthas rally as many men as they are able to and depart for the city, fighting their way through an encampment of undead. When they finally breach into the city, they find the man from before, who introduces himself as Kel'Thuzad, leader of the Cult of the Damned and architect of the plague. The undead monstrosities are bound to a demon named Mal'Ganis, and the purpose of the plague is to scour Lordaeron of all life. Kel'Thuzad tells Arthas that the answers he seeks lie in Stratholme with Mal'Ganis, and flees further into Anderhall. The grain has already been sent out from the city, and so with the necromancers back to the wall, Jaina and Arthas give chase. More abominations block their way, created in the wheeled slaughterhouses on the far end of the city, and after tearing them down, Kel'Thuzad is easily felled. With his dying breath, he warns Arthas that his death means little in the long run. Arthas and Jaina arrive the following day at Hearthglen, eager for rest, but their hopes would be quickly dashed. Overnight, a large undead force popped up and began attacking villages at random. Jaina teleports away to get Uther's help while Arthas remains behind to see to it that Hearthglen is defended. The plague was never simply meant to kill those that it had infected, but it would also raise them in undeath. The undead Scourge set to work on their mission of destroying all life in Lordaeron, and threw their countless numbers against Hearthglen's defenses. Nearby, a large shipment of infected grain traveled from village to village, killing more in its wake. Their numbers swelled with each village that fell, and they attacked en masse. Just as Arthas was being overrun, Uther arrived with a legion of his knights, and together they drove the undead back. Hearthglen was only the beginning, and so Arthas vows to go to Stratholme and strike down Mal'Ganis himself. Uther attempts at calming him down are fruitless, as Arthas tells Uther that, with or without him, he's going to Stratholme. The Prophet stops Arthas on the road, attempting to warn him that the further he tries to save his people, the faster he will deliver them into the hands of the enemy. The only way to save his people is to head to Kalimdor, but Arthas sends him away, even with Jaina questioning whether the old man does know what is coming. At Stratholme, Uther arrives to meet Arthas and Jaina. As they look on into the city, Arthas realizes that they are already too late. The plague has gripped the city, and soon they will all turn into the undead. The only solution is to strike them down before that happens. Appalled, Uther refuses the order, and when Arthas attempts to pull rank as future king, Uther refuses to yield. Claiming this to be treason, Arthas revokes Uther of his paladinship and disbands his knights. As Uther leaves, he is joined by Jaina. Although Arthas reaches out to her looking for support, she cannot simply stand by and watch him murder an entire town of innocent people. Inside Stratholme, the demonic dreadlord Mal'Ganis has already begun his work. Leading an army of ghouls and abominations, he moves to transform the city household by household into the undead. Witnessing this, Arthas vows that it's better that his people die by his hand than serve as monsters. What proceeded could only be called a massacre. Both Arthas and Mal'Ganis razed Stratholme to the ground. Some were killed in their sleep, or after they had already risen as zombies, while others died fleeing from their beloved prince. Those that tried to escape from the city were cut down by the Scourge, lying in wait just outside of the city walls. With the city in ruins, Arthas confronts Mal'Ganis, intent on finishing the conflict once and for all, only for the Dreadlord to tell him that if he wishes to fight him, then he would need to lead his men into Northrend. As Mal'Ganis escapes, Arthas calls out to him, vowing to hunt him down to the ends of the earth if he has to. Only those that managed to hide from the two armies were spared, but Stratholme was nothing but a smoldering ruin choked with corpses. The dead collected into great piles to be burned and cleared from the streets. As Jaina walks through the wreckage, staring on in horror, Uther comes looking for her. Arthas and Lordaeron's army have vanished, and while Jaina warned him that it sounded like a trap when he came to her, asking her to journey with him, Arthas ultimately sailed north to chase Mal'Ganis. Cursing his name, Uther rushes back to Capital City to have Tyrannus recall the army, reassuring Jaina she had no part in Arthas' actions. At last, the Prophet approaches Jaina, warning her that the dead in Stratholme will stir once more. Even though Arthas may have only been doing what he thought was right, only death awaits him down this path. But if Jaina wishes to save the survivors of Lordaeron, she would need to lead them west. Only there does her people stand any chance of surviving. Having arrived at the shores of the frozen north, Arthas leads his men into the shadows of Northrend, fending off wolves, trolls, and strange, spider-like Nerubians. When they finally find a gold mine, they are pelted with gunfire, which quickly ceases as their attackers realize they aren't undead. Muradin Bronzebeard, Arthas' former mentor, had led his men north seeking a legendary sword named Frostmourne, but he was cut off from his men by the undead and had been holding out against their endless waves, sending out distress calls. With Arthas' help, the two of them break through the Scourge base and rescue Muradin's men before Arthas directs their forces at Mal'Ganis. Marching into his base, they launch a flurry of steel and cannon fire, reducing the encampment to rubble. The Dreadlord, however, is nowhere to be seen, and so Arthas establishes the area as his force's main base, and turning to Muradin to ask about the sword he and his men came to find. An emissary from Lordaeron arrives at Arthas' camp, informing everyone that King Tyrannus has recalled the expedition to Northrend. With the roads overrun with the undead, his forces decide to cut through the trees back to their boats. When Arthas arrives and sees his men gone, he chooses to recruit the help of the nearby trolls and ogre mercenaries to burn down the ships. While Muradin is a bit apprehensive, he helps Arthas all the same as they cut their way through the roads. Ghouls, necromancers, and more vile abominations halt their path, along with more Nerubians and a long trench with Scourge towers lining the cliffs above, but Arthas presses on, making sure each ship is burned down to their frames. When at last his men reach the shore, Arthas turns on the mercenaries, blaming them for the destruction of their only way back home. With their deaths, the truth of Arthas' actions are hidden to his men, and he returns them to their posts, telling them that there is no way home other than through victory. Mal'Ganis has launched his forces against Arthas' base, and without reinforcements they will quickly fall. But perhaps, if Arthas and Muradin can find Frostmourne, it will be their salvation. Leading a small force through a nearby waygate, they fight their way into the sword's chamber. The revenants guarding it hold an ominous warning, saying they were protecting the prince from the sword. Within the chamber, an inscription on the sword's dais reads, "Whomsoever takes up this blade shall wield power eternal. Just as the blade rends flesh, so must power scar the spirit." Though Muradin urges Arthas to turn back and leave the cursed sword alone, Arthas, having damned his men in pursuit of his vengeance, calls out to whatever spirits rest in the cavern that he will pay any price to save his people. With Muradin dead and Frostmourne in Arthas' hands, the only matter left to attend to is Mal'Ganis. With Frostmourne's power, the undead are torn apart and quickly fall before its might. Reaching the Dreadlord, he taunts the prince that the voices he heeds from the blade is that of the Lord of the Damned. The Lich King himself whispers through the blade, and in his pursuit of vengeance, he has delivered himself right into the hands of the Scourge. Smugly, Mal'Ganis asks Arthas, "What does the Dark Lord of the Dead tell you now?" Listening to the whispers, Arthas tells Mal'Ganis that the time for his vengeance has come, before plunging the sword into Mal'Ganis' chest. From there, Arthas wanders off into the frozen wasteland of Northrend. Over months, the whispers of Frostmourne wore away at what remained of Arthas' sanity, and as he gave himself over to the will of the Lich King, he gathered his men and set sail, intent on returning home to Lordaeron.
Ah, my son.
You no longer need to sacrifice for your people. You no longer need to bear the weight of your crown. I've taken care of everything.
this kingdom shall fall. And from the ashes shall arise a new order that will shake the very foundations of the world.
With Arthas' triumph over evil, word of his return swept through Lordaeron. Great feasts and celebrations were held, and many flocked to Capital City to witness their beloved prince. Tyrannus, racked with worry, welcomed his son with open arms, but as Arthas kneeled before the throne, he spoke to his father. For the last 50 years, Tyrannus sat on the throne and suffered through the Second War and its aftermath. Now his service was no longer needed. Arthas' captains moved to slaughter all else in the room, while Arthas himself strode forward and seized his father. Tyrannus, asking what Arthas was doing, would only receive the answer,
Succeeding you, father.
The crown of Lordaeron clattered to the ground, and in the aftermath would be lost to the world forevermore. With the death of Tyrannus, Lordaeron had fallen to ruin, and from its ashes, the Scourge rises. In the wreckage of Lordaeron, a dreadlord appears before Arthas and introduces himself as Tichondrius. He praises Arthas for the work he has done so far, but the Lich King has further use for him. First and foremost, the cult of the Dam must be rallied. As Arthas sets off toward the nearby villages, one of the cultists assures him that all is as Kel'Thuzad foretold, but that word has spread of Arthas' betrayal. Without a sizable force, Arthas and his ghouls are forced to sneak their way through the countryside, slaying villagers and alerting the cultists that it is time to come out of hiding, while avoiding the patrolling footmen and knights. After visiting a nearby graveyard to boost his meager forces, the rest of the acolytes are alerted and await their prince by Tichondrius. Although Lordaeron lies in ruins, the cultists will prove useful for the task that lies ahead. Setting forth for Anderhall, Tichondrius instructs Arthas that the former leader of the cult, Kel'Thuzad, will need to be resurrected. Prior to his death, Kel'Thuzad was an incredibly powerful necromancer, and thus his resurrection can only occur at a place of substantial magical energy. As no place exists nearby, meat wagons are brought in to carry the remains, as well as to knock down the barricades put in place by Gavinrad the Dire, one of the former paladins of the Silver Hand. Gavinrad is the first to fall, but upon approaching the tomb, Kel'Thuzad's remains are too badly decomposed and will require a special urn to make the journey north to Quel'thalas, where the elves' Sunwell will provide more than enough magic for the resurrection. Yet along the road, other members of the Silver Hand bar the way. Balador the Bright chastises Arthas, telling him that due to his actions, Uther has stripped himself of his own honor, while Sage Truthbringer admonishes him for breaking Uther's heart. Both fall before the Scourge war machine, leaving only one paladin remaining between Arthas and the urn. Uther was the first paladin and a founding member of the Order of the Silver Hand. He was a hero of the Second War and became a close friend of King Tyrannus. So close a friend, Tyrannus asked Uther to train Arthas as a paladin. The two of them began to grow close, becoming good friends, with Uther trying to settle Arthas' darker tendencies. Yet here the two of them stand facing against each other. Uther, defending the tomb of his king and his friend, is forced to confront his former student and seeing the monster he had become. When the two of them engaged in combat, it was a long and hard-fought battle, with neither side giving ground. But before Uther could land the killing blow, Arthas gained the upper hand and bent the paladin to his knees, leaving just enough time for Uther to speak his dying words.
I dearly hope that there's a special place in hell waiting for you, Arthas.
We may never know, Uther. I intend to live forever.
The Twisting Nether, realm of demons and home of the Burning Legion. Within this festering hellscape, Tichondrius arrives to answer the summons of his brethren Enetheron and Mephistoth. One of the Sargerai lords of the Burning Legion, Lord Archimond, demands a report on the progress of Azeroth's invasion. So it would seem, Arthas has been performing a little too well of late, and Tichondrius is beginning to suspect that perhaps Ner'zhul has ulterior motives for his new pet. Such a thought is quickly brushed off, however, as the Lich King would not dare anger his masters. Should Tichondrius fail to control Ner'zhul and the Scourge, it will be their heads on the chopping block. And yet, Arthas heeds not the voice of the Lich King alone. With the remains secured, Kel'Thuzad whispers in the prince's ear. He tells Arthas that the Dreadlords are the Lich King's jailers, and that upon the hour of his rebirth, Kel'Thuzad will reveal the truth of the Scourge's invasion. The lush and vibrant land of the Elves is one that Arthas has not visited since he was a child, and Kel'Thuzad reminds him that the Elves are not to be underestimated. Using the meat wagons to break their way in through the trees, their prisoners inform them that there are 2 gates that stand between the Scourge and the city of Silvermoon. Barring the way is the Ranger General of the High Elves, Sylvanas Windrunner, the younger sister of Illyria. Though she tries to hold him off with hit-and-run tactics, the outlying elven cities are broken beneath the might of the Scourge war machine, each one ground to dust under the claws of ghouls and the flying corpses of the meat wagons. The first elf gate was swept away under a tide of bone, and Sylvanas was forced to retreat her forces back to the second gate, with Arthas following closely behind. The Scourge chased the retreating elves to a great river, where Sylvanas makes her stand, taunting Arthas. The second elf gate is impenetrable except for a special key that was separated into 3 pieces. In an attempt to further slow them down, the bridge is destroyed, forcing Arthas to rely on the nearby goblins for passage across the river. The fragments of the 3 keys are luckily held nearby on special altars, guarded by warded towers and elven forces. These altars are separated by vast distances, but luckily for Arthas, a number of nearby waygates are connected to the 3 keys, allowing the Scourge to drop in on the enemy defenses and obliterate them. With the key assembled, only the defenses entrenched around the gate are left. With the goblins' help, Arthas makes it across the water, and the elves are slaughtered as Arthas uses the key to unlock the gate. The path to Silvermoon now lies exposed, with Sylvanas' forces retreating further into elven lands. The Scourge base lies on the very doorstep of Silvermoon City, and Sylvanas plays her final hand. From her encampment nearby, runners are sent along the road to call out for reinforcements and to warn Silvermoon of the ravenous undead marching towards them. Unfortunately for Sylvanas, gargoyles laying in wait quickly descend and cut down the runner, and pursue any others they attempt to send out. Sylvanas would not be spared Arthas' wrath, as a quick detour from their primary objective brings the undead horde down on their base. Valiantly the elves fought until the bitter end, but one by one each warrior fell until only Sylvanas remained and was dragged before Arthas himself. Bent down on her knees, she asks Arthas for a quick and clean death, but for all the trouble she has been, Arthas has something else in mind than giving Sylvanas the peace of death. Ripping the soul from her body, Sylvanas is turned into a wailing banshee and made to serve the Scourge in the destruction of her homeland. The Sunwell lies at the heart of Silvermoon City, and it is from there that the elves feast upon its magic. Built upon the convergence of many powerful ley lines, the elves are unlikely to give it up easily. They would die to defend their home, which Arthas is only too happy to indulge. The resulting siege was a slaughter, devastating the elven population, and Arthas personally ended the reign of King Anastarion Sunstrider. In total, 90% of their population was wiped out as Arthas made his way to the Sunwell Plateau. There, after slaying its guardians, he would dump the remains of Kel'Thuzad into its light-blessed waters, which would become tainted with necromantic energies, and Kel'Thuzad would rise once again as a powerful lich. With his resurrection, Arthas holds Kel'Thuzad to his promise to tell him everything he knows about the Burning Legion. Happy to oblige, Kel'Thuzad leads the Death Knight somewhere private, away from the prying eyes and ears of the Dreadlords. Traveling south into the Alterac Mountains, Arthas and Kel'Thuzad converse. Even before their first encounter, Kel'Thuzad knew Arthas would slay him and later resurrect him, as the Lich King chose Arthas as his champion long ago. Yet, for all of the Lich King's power, he was imprisoned by the Dreadlords after Ner'zhul left Draenor all those years ago. The Burning Legion itself is a vast army of demons led by the fallen titan Sargeras, along with his 2 great generals, Archimonde the Defiler and Kil'jaeden the Deceiver. Their sole purpose is to wipe out all life from the universe and have destroyed countless other worlds. The Scourge was created to wipe out any who would oppose their return, such as the forces of Lordaeron or the High Elves, and the Dreadlords were put in place to ensure the Lich King's success. Now the way is paved for their return, and the first phase of the demon's plan has been fulfilled. Here in Alterac, the second phase is already being put in motion. The second phase involves summoning Archimonde into Azeroth to kick off the demonic invasion. Luckily, there were a number of orcs from the Blackrock clan that refused to follow Thrall west. After being freed from the internment camps, their warlocks predicted demons would return to Azeroth and adopted their demon-worshipping ways once more, so far as maintaining a nearby demon gate Kel'Thuzad could use to communicate with Archimonde. The Orcs hold no favor with the Legion following their failure to claim Azeroth in the Second War, so this renegade group of Blackrock Orcs would be put down and their champions cut down as examples of all who would oppose the Scourge. With the path to the gate littered with corpses, Kel'Thuzad calls out to Archimonde, receiving a vision of him through the demon gate and receiving further instructions. In order to summon the Demon Lord, the last spellbook of Medivh, once used by Ner'zhul on Draenor, must be collected from the city of Dalaran, and their ritual performed at twilight 3 days from now. At the gates of Dalaran, Arthas calls out for the city to surrender. Archmage Antonidas rides out to meet him in response, warning Arthas that the Kirin Tor have already prepared for the Scourge's arrival. A magical veil has been placed over the city that causes any undead caught inside to wither and decay, rendering them unable to even drag themselves on. The effect isn't instant, however, meaning that Arthas and Kel'Thuzad will need to work quickly to kill the 3 wizards maintaining the field, allowing them to freely roam the city without reprisal. Fordred Aran valiantly held the gates to the city, and Nihilus Arcanister, just across a series of canals, attempted to fend off the undead, but both were cut down by Arthas. Antonidas was more formidable, however, summoning watery elementals and raining ice down upon the undead, but he would fall all the same, his soul devoured by Frostmourne. With the field down, the Scourge charged into Dalaran, allowing Kel'Thuzad to find the Book of Medivh and prepare for the ritual that sunset. The ritual has been prepared, and as Kel'Thuzad assumes his position at the center of the ritual circle, Arthas establishes defending the altar. The remaining forces of the Kirin Tor that had survived the Scourge attack had rallied together, determined to stop the summoning. The Archmages and their forces do their best to force their way through the erected ziggurats, waves of skeletons, and hulking Nerubians, but as time drags on, the veil between Azeroth and the twisting nether grows thin. Demonic fellhounds and infernals crash onto the battlefield, supplying Arthas with reinforcements. Their efforts would prove futile as Kel'Thuzad finishes the ritual and Archimonde the Defiler steps foot onto Azeroth. With the Lich King's purpose fulfilled, the Scourge is put under the command of the Dreadlords. Though Arthas is infuriated with the outcome, Kel'Thuzad urges him patience as Ner'zhul has already foreseen this outcome and has plotted accordingly.
Ora, mordanos melar, il amor no falos cada.
The wizards of Dalaran have done their best to try and fend off the return of the Legion, and as his first act on this world, Archimonde decides to make an example out of them. The battle to take Dalaran had been one that was hard fought by the Scourge, but with a simple display of power, drawing a simulacrum of the city out of the sand. Archimonde topples the city with ease. When the Scourge first marched for the city, evacuations had begun, but they were not completed. Many died when the city collapsed, and many others were left trapped by the fallen debris. The Kirin Tor attempted to reclaim control of the city, but malformed experiments, berserk elementals, and mad wizards left the ruins in chaos. Not even the Horde had done as much damage in the Second War during the siege. Yet with but a clench of Archimonde's hands, the great ivory towers crumbled away. Tearing his eyes away from the ruins, Archimonde's forces would be directed west into Kalimdor, where the demon's ancient enemies lay waiting for them. After having passed through a savage storm, Thrall's ships crash into a strange and barren shore. Many of their forces, including Grom, were left separated from the storm, but if they made it through, they'd be along the coast. As they travel across the rugged landscape, rescuing the orcs and trolls they find, Thrall's men also encounter centaurs, harpies, and pigmen called Quilboar. In a nearby valley, the centaur seem to be charging north, dressed for war, and the reasoning soon becomes apparent. The great and noble bullmen called Tauren live in the area, led by Cairn Bloodhoof. Thrall catches Cairn's attention as they fight off the centaur, and mentions an oracle far to the north. As it turns out, Cairn's village also lies to the north, on the path the centaur are marching, and so Thrall and Cairn race back to the village, defending it from waves of the marauders. The centaur have driven off the game in the area, and so the Tauren have packed up their camp to head west into the plains of Mulgore. Thrall offers to help escort Cairn in exchange for information on the oracle. The Kodo beasts used to carry the supplies are overburdened, and so the caravan moves from one oasis to the next to allow them moments of rest. Along their journey, the centaur hunt the caravan, their speed unrivaled on the open fields. Luckily, Warsong survivors lay on the path as well, searching for Thrall, and readily join the caravan. After making their way through a long, rocky pass, the centaur chasing at their heels, Cairn collapses the nearby rocks to cut off the path behind them. At last, the Tauren have reached Mulgore, and Thrall is ready to search for his people's destiny. Far to the north, at the base of Mount Hyjal, lies Stone Talon Peak. There lies the home of the Oracle, and after thanking his newfound friend, Thrall rallies his forces to head north. Back in Lordaeron, Tichondrius checks in with the great pit lord called Manaroth. The remaining humans in the region offer no real resistance to the Legion, as the Scourge did its job well of weakening Azeroth's defenders, unlike a certain failed race. Years ago on Draenor, the orc warlock Gul'dan made a deal with Manaroth, and by convincing the other orcs to drink the pit lord's blood, they would sell their souls to the Legion. The orcs were the Legion's second attempt at claiming Azeroth, but when they failed, the Fellfire burnt out in their veins while they languished in the internment camps. The orcs are still bound to Manaroth's blood pact, however, and he has come searching for them. The orcs are not in Lordaeron anymore, but have instead arrived at Kalimdor, and according to Archimonde, they may still have their part to play in all of this, despite their previous failure. After traveling for a week through the desert, Thrall hears bells off in the distance. Upon investigation, they arrive at a human settlement where Grom and the Warsong are burning it to the ground. Once the fighting ceases, Grom explains that the humans are being led by a girl named Proudmoore, and that they have cut off the path north. Thrall sends out scouts to find a nearby goblin workshop to secure a zeppelin up to Stone Talon Peak, but Grom, despite being given orders to avoid the humans, grows impatient and leads a party to attack them. With the humans now aware of their presence, Thrall is forced to assist Grom in clearing out the other bases before purchasing the zeppelins. After making the deal with the local goblins, Thrall turns his attention to Grom, chastising him for disobeying a direct order. Grom has been taking pleasure in fighting the humans, commenting that it feels just like the old days, but his bloodlust is starting to become a liability. Thrall heads north to see the Oracle, while Grom is told to stay behind and construct a settlement for when they return. In the nearby forests of Ashenvale, the Warsong clan start setting up their new settlement. Grom curses Thrall for delegating his greatest warriors to manual labor, but his thoughts are cut short by one of his men. Apparently, some of the orcs are growing frightened of the forest, believing them to be haunted. The settlement will require a great amount of lumber, however, and so Grom sets his workers back to the task of cutting down trees. Their presence agitates those hiding in the shadows, and strange warrior women begin attacking them. They look like elves, but they seem taller and more savage than any elves from Quel'thalas. As Grom explores the forest, he finds great trees guarded by the strange elves, and so he slaughters their forces and brings down the trees, quickly swelling their resources. Once the Warsong have enough lumber and the elves have been driven off deeper into Ashenvale, they begin work on constructing the settlement. After 10,000 years, demons set foot in Ashenvale Forest once again. The first invasion of the Burning Legion was also known as the War of the Ancients. The power that flowed forth from the sacred Well of Eternity would be used to summon the Legion in exchange for purging the lesser races from Azeroth. Many Night Elves rebelled against Ajara. Along with the Dragonflights, they would fight back against the Legion and banish them from the world. In doing so, however, the Well of Eternity would collapse in on itself, causing a cataclysm referred to as the Sundering. The great land of Kalimdor would be broken into the various continents, and the Night Elves would quietly go into hiding. If the demon's plans are to succeed, Cenarius will have to be dealt with. The Blood Pact still binds the orcs to Manaroth, and after spilling his blood into a nearby pool, the Pit Lord and Tichondrius quickly hide away, waiting for the corruption to lure the orcs into drinking the blood once more. From atop a hill, the demigod Cenarius watches as the orcs defile the ancient woods, and decides to drive them off. The nearby trees come alive and attack the orcs as the Night Elves and their forces quickly charge in behind them. The orcs would retreat across the river and entrench themselves there as the rest of their settlement is destroyed. Once the orcs have retreated, Cenarius regrows the forests and prepares to wipe them out. One of the troll witch doctors senses a strange and dark power emanating from the woods, and so Grom decides to investigate, believing it may be a way to stop Cenarius. There in the nearby woods lies a blood-red pool. The witch doctor smells the stench of demons coming from it, but Grom, already having been cursed, decides to drink from the pool. Some of the orcs with him point out that this goes against everything Thrall has taught them, but Grom insists that their rage must instead be embraced. Stronger than ever before, the Warsong embrace the demon's curse. With this newfound strength, even Cenarius would fall before them. The demigod cowers in the woods, but Grom would draw him out. Leading his forces back across the river, Grom sets to work in tearing apart the Night Elves and their encampment. Taken by surprise by the newfound strength of the orcs, the Night Elves quickly fell in a tide of blood and steel. When at last Cenarius did step out from the shadows to confront Grom, he found the orcs now stood on equal footing with his own strength. With a savage war cry, the orcs would kill the demigod, and the remaining Night Elves would flee into the forests. As the Warsong celebrated their victory, Manaroth would emerge, binding the orcs once more to himself. Though Grom initially refuses, stating that he and the orcs are free of him, Manaroth points out that it was his blood that they drank from, and that they would be forever bound to serve him and to forever serve the Legion. The scouts sent up to Stone Talon Peak have reported the humans have entrenched themselves all the way up to the summit. Thrall will have to fight his way up, but he will not need to fight alone. Cairn arrives to help the orcs reach the Oracle and repay the debt they owe. The humans' presence has upset the nearby wyverns and has driven them off of their homes at the summit into the waiting claws of the harpies. After killing the harpies and freeing the wyverns, the orcs look up towards the human base high up on the ridge. The humans had situated themselves where no ground forces could get to them, leaving them free to rain fire from above. But with the help of the wyverns and the goblin zeppelins, Thrall and his forces made their way up. Dropping in on the Lordaeron survivors, the orcs proceeded to lay waste to the encampment. Jaina retreated into the caverns in search of the Oracle, with Thrall and Cairn quickly following behind. Within the Oracle's cave, the path splits off in two. Down the left path, Thrall, along with a small party of orcs and trolls, encounter all manner of spirits, quillboar, and other horrid monsters lurking in the darkness. The path forward is blocked by a living statue that requests Thrall bring her back her heart. Long ago, a Night Elf priestess once mocked the Oracle's wisdom and was turned to stone as a punishment, but by bringing back her gemstone heart, the curse is broken, and she happily opens the door forward. Unfortunately, the spectral bridge that leads to the Oracle's sanctum has vanished, preventing passage. Cairn, having gone down the right path, encounters a large pit filled with quillboar guarding some kind of gemstone. Flipping a nearby mechanism, the pit is rigged with a number of spikes that skewer the boarmen, allowing Cairn to retrieve the gemstone. Deeper down the path, Cairn reunites with Thrall, and with the gemstone in hand, the spectral bridge forward appears, allowing the group access to the innermost chamber. Within the Oracle's chamber, Jaina has already arrived. Before the two forces can engage each other, the Prophet appears before them, preventing any violence within this sacred place. The Oracle promised was the Prophet from Lordaeron, who has lured both the remainder of the Horde and Alliance here to unfold their destinies. It is here that the Prophet tells Thrall and the Orcs what has befallen Lordaeron, and that Jaina leads the survivors that managed to escape from the destruction. Now that it has fallen, the Burning Legion makes their way towards Kalimdor. Only by joining forces do the Horde or Alliance stand any chance of stopping them. Both Thrall and Jaina are apprehensive to suddenly join with the hated enemies of their races, but the Prophet warns Thrall that Grom has already fallen under demonic influence, and soon the entirety of the Orc race will fall back under their sway. As Thrall races off, the Prophet offers his words of wisdom to Jaina. Old enemies must unite against a common foe. Just over the nearby ridge lies the Warsong encampment, and Thrall, Cairn, and Jaina ready their strategy. Jaina gifts Thrall with a soul gem that will allow Thrall to capture Grom's spirit, and bring it back to their base to be cleansed of the demonic influence that has taken it. The two of them comment that they never thought they'd see the day their two races worked together, before Jaina and Cairn set off to prepare their defenses. Yet as they rally their forces, the sky glows with an eerie green fire. As fel-infused orcs throw themselves at Thrall's defenses, fiery infernals rain down from the sky to join in the fray. Setting out isn't much better, as the Warsong have firmly established themselves in the area. With a heavy heart, Thrall is forced to fight his way through his own people, but if Grom, who is like a brother to Thrall, cannot be saved, then perhaps there is no hope for the rest of the orcs. After battling through hordes of ravenous fellhounds and hulking doomguards, Thrall and Cairn reach Grom, sitting on his throne. Thrall had always believed that the demons corrupted the Orcish race, but this was only half true. As he confronts Grom, the old warrior tells him otherwise. The Orcs willingly accepted Manaroth's offer. The first among them to accept the bargain was Grom himself, and it was he who damned their race. Enraged, Thrall charges at Grom, and the two would become locked in combat. The battle between the two was tense, but Thrall managed to gain the upper hand and capture Grom within the soul gem. With haste, he returns back to Jaina's base, where her priests and Thrall's shamans begin the ritual to purify his spirit. When at last the demon's influence has left Grom's body, he stands before Thrall, ashamed of giving in to his pride and recklessness. But Thrall brushes aside his apologies. The orcs were still in danger of falling to the curse, but according to Grom, Manaroth was waiting in a nearby canyon. Thrall and Grom would set off to confront the Pit Lord and end the blood curse once and for all.
So predictable. I knew you would come. And I see you brought the mighty Hellscream. His blood is mine. As is your whole misbegotten race. the same. The blood haze has lifted. The demon's fire has burnt out in my veins. I have freed myself. No, old friend. You freed us all.
On the border of Ashenvale Forest, Thrall and Grom carefully enter the dark and twisted canyon. Manaroth, lurking nearby, taunts the two of them before revealing himself. The orcs belong to him, and he will not let go of them so easily. The Pit Lord shrugs off any attack thrown at him, and tosses Thrall into the nearby rocks. Turning his attention to Grom, he points out that Thrall would never understand the fire that burns within his soul. He and the Pit Lord are one and the same. Enraged, Grom charges at Manaroth, burying his axe in the demon's chest. The demon, letting out an agonized cry, erupts in a fiery explosion. Grom, badly injured from the blast, falls to the ground as Thrall limps over to him. With his dying words, Grom tells Thrall that the demon's fire has finally burnt out within him. With his final act, he has freed himself from the blood haze. With his final sacrifice, he has freed the Orcish race. Something dark is stirring within Ashenvale Forest, and Chandra's Feathermoon approaches the High Priestess of the Night Elves, Tyrande Whisperwind. They watch over a nearby settlement of humans and orcs, whose alliance is still tenuous, kept in check by Duke Lionheart. They brazenly run rampant through these sacred woods, which Tyrande will personally ensure they will regret. Mustering her sentinels, she stalks through Ashenvale, hiding her forces in the underbrush and the moonlight. They would spring upon the human-orc settlement and catch their prey by surprise. Lionheart would try to rally his forces to strike back, but in the ensuing chaos, the Night Elves would kill him and cause further panic. Tyrande would not get the chance to finish off the settlement, as fire begins to rain down from the skies, and the undead cut their way through the trees. She would pull her forces back and leave the humans and orcs to their fates, troubled by the demon's presence. Tyrande and her archers would race through the trees, followed closely behind by ghouls and doomguards. When at last they are cornered, Tychondrius and Archimonde reveal themselves to the priestess to gloat of their victory, promising that this time, the Night Elves will not be enough to stop them. Sensing a moment to escape, Tyrande conceals herself in the shadows and slips away. Under the eyes of the Legion, Tyrande quietly moves through the trees, careful not to attract any attention, and rescuing any sentinels she comes across. Their shadow meld only works at night, and so Tyrande would need to hurry and cross over the river to safety before the dawn breaks. With the use of abandoned ballista, the Night Elves leveled the Scourge base blocking their path and reached the settlement. The Scourge appeared out of nowhere and nearly overwhelmed the settlement, but Chandra's managed to fend them off. After considering their situation, Tyrande realizes if they hope to fight back, they will need the assistance of the Druids. Since Cenarius is dead, Tyrande will need to awaken the Druids herself. Arriving at the sacred moonglade, they find the undead cutting through the trees toward the barrow den of the great archdruid Malfurion Stormrage. Within, the Druid slumbers, and his spirit has awoken within a realm of life known as the Emerald Dream. In order to awaken him, Tyrande will need to retrieve the Horn of Cenarius, but the way is blocked by a Horde settlement. Without any time to lose, Tyrande and her forces punch their way through the settlement and contend with the 3 guardian spirits protecting the horn. With it in hand, she blows into the horn, rousing the Archdruid. As Malfurion wakes up, leaving the Barrow Den, he senses that the touch of decay has already begun to corrupt the lands and turns the trees against the undead, driving them back. It has been 1,000 years since Malfurion and Tyrande last laid eyes upon one another, but their reunion is cut short by the severity of the situation. Malfurion theorizes that Archimonde may attempt to scale Mount Hyjal and drain the energies of the World Tree, and upon seeing a nearby group of humans fighting back against the undead, ponders if they may be useful allies as well. It was the outsiders to their lands that killed Cenarius, however, so Tyrande cuts off this line of thinking, and instead looks to the Barrow Dens on the far side of Winterspring, where the Druids of the Talons slumber. After avoiding the clashing human and undead armies, they find the woods around the Barrow Dens have been corrupted by a cursed revenant. Not only this, but the Night Elf settlement in the area was corrupted by the Satyrs, and after slaying the Satyrs and corrupted Treants, Malfurion sounds the horn to awaken the Druids of the Talon. All that remains is awakening the Druids of the Claw deep below the earth. The Barrow Dens have been sealed for nearly 3,000 years, and yet demonic corruption has still found its way inside, twisting the fauna into nightmarish abominations. Descending into the depths, Malfurion and Tyrande come across a great door, and while Tyrande is interested in what is behind it, Malfurion refuses to open it. Behind the door lies the prison of his brother Illidan Stormrage, who betrayed their people long ago. Though Malfurion forbids Tyrande from entering, she remains headstrong that Illidan may help them, and so she enters regardless. Malfurion instead turns his attention to waking up the Druids of the Claw, but upon sounding the horn, the Druids have gone feral. Only by reaching the deepest reaches of the caves and sounding the horn once more do the Druids fully awaken, returning to their Night Elven forms. Entering Illidan's prison with a handful of her loyal sentinels, Tyrande presses onwards, praying she is right Illidan will help them. Even their goddess Elune has condemned him, but surely after 10,000 years of imprisonment, Illidan has changed. The wardens block her path, and so Tyrande is forced to cull them as she makes her way to the only cell of the prison. Along the way, she comes across caches of goblin explosives and an armory of warden weaponry, and puts them to use in reaching the betrayer. His cell is guarded by a druid of the grove, urging Tyrande to turn back, but she insists Illidan was a hero once, and he can be again. Upon reaching the cell, Tyrande allows Illidan to break free, informing him of the Legion's return. Though he owes nothing to their people, he once loved Tyrande, and agrees to fight against them if only for her. When at last he steps out of his prison, Malfurion confronts Illidan and the two trade verbal blows, with Tyrande breaking up the argument. Malfurion warns that before the end, the betrayer may just be the doom of them all. During the War of the Ancients, Illidan had fought alongside his brother Malfurion before he defected to the side of the Legion. His reasoning for doing so was to ultimately betray the Legion, but he would be branded as a betrayer of his people and imprisoned for his crimes. Now free to walk the world once again, he intends to show to all he is no villain, a proclamation challenged by a knight atop a nearby hill. Sensing death upon him, Illidan challenges the man to a fight, but the two combatants were equally matched. When asking for his reasoning in coming, Arthas offers Illidan the source of the corruption tainting the forests. The skull of the warlock Gul'dan is being used to transform the land into the Fellwood, and it lies in the hands of the demon Tichondrius, who also commands the Scourge. By stealing the skull and killing Tichondrius, both of them would benefit, and with this in mind, Illidan cuts through the demons guarding the skull. Though he stops the corruption of the woods, he considers the opportunity before him. Should he absorb the powers of the skull, Illidan will become more powerful than any of Archimonde's lieutenants. Illidan would draw in the skull's power once held by the Great Warlock. It would change his body and soul, becoming something entirely demonic. Nothing would stand in his way now, and Tichondrius would be the first to taste his wrath. Tichondrius would be caught off guard momentarily, but would face Illidan with a deadly ferocity. The Dreadlord's armor was tough to cut through with mortal instruments, but Illidan struck him with the same fell powers that fueled the demon. Against another demon, Tichondrius stood no chance, and he would be slain. When Malfurion and Tyrande arrive, they're horrified with what Illidan has done. The one controlling the undead may have been slain, but it was at the cost of Illidan's soul. Unable to even look at his brother, Malfurion banishes Illidan from their homeland and orders him never to return. A punishment Illidan accepts willingly as he takes his leave. 2 days after Illidan's departure, Malfurion and Tyrande arrive at a meeting place, beckoned by a great raven in a dream. Before long, two outsiders also arrive, introducing themselves as Thrall and Jaina. As Tyrande angrily informs them they are not welcome in these lands, the prophet arrives and offers the help of the two outsiders. Malfurion asks who this prophet is to promise their assistance, and the prophet reveals he is to blame for the Legion's return. Decades ago, he summoned the orcs into Azeroth in his madness, and he was killed by those he called his friends. Even so, war raged across the Eastern Kingdoms for many long years after his death, and those that remained brought the Legion back to their world. Medivh, the last guardian of Azeroth, has returned to set things right at last, and to ensure the Legion fails in its efforts at destroying his world. And to this end, the forces of the Alliance, Horde, and Night Elves will need to stand together against Lord Archimonde. Archimonde has begun his march to the summit of Mount Hyjal, and Malfurion reminisces of long ago. Though the Legion was defeated 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves were left to their immortality as the world shattered, bound to the World Tree Nordrassil. Now the time has come to give that power back, and if they are questioning whether or not it is worth it to give up eternal life, then they have already held it for far too long. Malfurion rushes to the summit, preparing its defenses, while Jaina, Thrall, and Tyrande attempt to delay Archimonde. The first on the demon's path is Jaina, and while the humans attempt to hold off the undead as long as they are able, they are overwhelmed by the Scourge, and Jaina teleports her remaining forces to safety. Further up, Thrall holds out as long as he can, defying Archimonde that the orcs are now free, before he too teleports to safety. Archimonde has become overconfident, and when his forces bear down on the Night Elves, they retreat and clear the path to the World Tree. With its power, the doom of Azeroth is ensured, were it not that Malfurion had already finished setting his trap.
The roots will heal in time, as will the entire world. The sacrifices have been made. Just as the orcs, humans, and night elves discarded their old hatreds and stood united against a common foe, so did nature herself rise up to banish the shadow forever. As for me, I came back to ensure that there would be a future, to teach the world that it no longer needed guardians. The hope for future generations has always resided in mortal hands. And now that my task is done, I will take my place amongst the legends of the past.
As Archimonde reaches Nordrassil, Malfurion blows into the Horn of Cenarius, springing the trap. Archimonde would embrace the tree, attempting to drain it of its power, but in his focus, he would fail to notice the spirits of the forest leaving their homes and amassing around him. They would surround him, trapping him, and the full power of Nordrassil would be unleashed upon him. The resulting burst of energy not only destroyed Archimonde, but burned the forests of Mount Hyjal, and stripped the Night Elves of their immortality and dominion over the wilds. But over time, the roots of the World Tree would heal, the forests would regrow, just as the rest of the world would mend its wounds. Nature herself fought back and banished the shadow. No longer does the world need to rely on guardians, as fate has always resided in mortal hands. With Azeroth saved, Medivh once again fades into the legends of history, leaving the humans, orcs, and night elves to shape their future as they see fit.